What's up, everybody? This is Jimmy with Trading Decoded. It is 3:23 in the afternoon, and the market is not closed yet. It's 10:20. It's October 24th, 2024, and we called it right before 3 o'clock today. Chart starts to tighten up. Things aren't so advantageous for trading, so we walk away before we make matters even worse. Today started out quite entertaining. Then it got to be a little bit sketchy. And then we had to be patient. I, for one, was one and done. So was several other people in our community, all in the same trade, which was our put scenario. And well, I'll explain what that is when we get to it. And the rest was kind of choppy. Now, I'm going to explain a phenomenon to you that I don't know if I feel it or if you feel it too, but let's go and launch charts first and see what's going on. So in pre-market, we have a pretty tight range. Basically, we stayed between 580.48 and 581.08 for the most part until right before open. Now, as always, we have call put scenarios. We were looking for a break above 580.89 for our calls, and our puts were below 580.23. The only caveat is we wanted to see the Qs also below their first target low. Okay, now, the problem with this morning's put is that we got below our put line in pre-market. Qs were sitting on it and ultimately broke their first line at open. If you marketed into this trade, you probably didn't get the best fill. So this was a tough trade to get into. We were prepared for puts, and if you are in my room, you already know why, but if you're not, I'm going to explain to you why. It's very simple. If we are putting in lower highs, I am expecting support to break, not hold. That's all it takes for me. I'm not suggesting that the entire day is going to be a down day. I'm not suggesting that you have to take puts. I'm just telling you, it's the reason I tell everybody in my community why the call put scenario are what they are for me, is I'm talking myself into taking a trade if certain criteria are met. I'm removing what hesitation may exist if I overthink it. Okay, that's all I'm doing with the call put scenario, and I'm trying to apply logic. It's the same logic that I would apply in any trade during the trading day. It just happens to be near the open. Lower highs on Qs, lower highs on SPY, i.e. trending down into the open. I'm looking for a quick continuation of that move after the open. Sometimes it's a very big move. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it works just enough. Whatever the case is, and sometimes there's reasons on one chart that says take it and the other one says not to take it. And in case we don't take the trade, or we take the risk of taking it with a little bit less confidence that it's going to work. Okay, so this is something we do every single day, every day. And in this case, we needed two criteria. We needed Qs below their first target low. We would hope for it to at least get to the next one, but it aggressively sold off and continued to. We were really hoping, at least I was, for 490.14. When we struggled to get through this dotted line and to continue down is when we start to tell people, hey, we're struggling. The only reason SPY wasn't moving up with Qs here, although it was a little bit, was because ADD was moving down at the time. So ADD was keeping SPY in check for the most part, but you had a nice resistance up here on the Qs. Okay, that was keeping us safe for those people who were holding on to puts a little bit longer. So the entry candle was the opening candle. Okay, the take profit was here because it was when we started to struggle to continue to move down that I told everybody you should be in profit. Go ahead and move your stops into profit. If we get stopped out, and you made something. If you don't get stopped out because it keeps going, you made extra. Okay, for me, I wanted to stay in because I wanted to get down to this line. This was uncomfortable, but resistance was holding here on the Qs. It was holding here on NVIDIA. Tesla had a hell of a day today. It still is. It's up 21% on the day. Outstanding. Which is keeping the Qs now slowly grinding up. Okay, I'm sure. But nonetheless, As long as we stay below this resistance, we were hoping to get down. And every time SPY would come back down to this line, I would remind people, guys, if you're uncomfortable in this, take yourself out of the trade. If you're uncomfortable in this, take yourself out of the trade. I ended up, once we got back down here again, we had 9:45 reports today. Told everybody if I was in profit, as we come into those reports, I will take myself out of the trade. If I was red on the trade at the time, I would stay in the trade, hoping that the reports would get me into profit, which ended up being the case, but I was in profit when I stopped out of the trade, which is during this candle. So I put a stop loss in while we were here at this very strong support level. We pushed down a little bit lower, was able to have my stop in place. When it pulled back, it stopped me out of the trade, and then that was it. Of course, 2 minutes later, it gets awfully close to where we really wanted to go, but that's water under the bridge. That's the only trade I took today. It was about a 29% win, and I was pretty happy with that. We had several people, probably 35 people take that trade with me this morning. The wins ranged from 12%. Some people got a little bit more. Some people held through that and made a lot more. But nonetheless, I justify these trades with reasoning every time we take them. And you either take them or you don't. If you don't, it's okay. You don't like it, you don't take it. That's the way we roll. Now, things got to be a little bit sketchy in that Qs were all over the place, kind of bouncing around in a not so clean channel. ADD was in a pretty healthy downtrend today. But at times, while ADD was coming down, Qs were not going with it. So when you've got Qs and ADD going in opposite directions, SPY is going to have a difficult time picking a direction. So the next trade that we actually talked about was this right here. So we start finally making lower highs, lower lows. That did get broken and we did run up, got through. As we come back down, one thing that was changing was ADD kept continuing to go lower. ADD was continuing to go lower. Told everybody, guys, this is a lower high. That's looking good. We should be looking for support here to break, not hold. Now, it took a few minutes, so it was a little bit uncomfortable. Told everybody, if we are able to get through the support on the Qs, right here, this support right here, that we were likely to continue down and at least get to this, but hopefully down to the first orange line. It went, and then it got aggressive, and it ended up paying quite nice. Now, this is when the Qs hit their line, so that ended up being quite a nice trade right here. Qs were putting in lower highs, struggled to move low, but once we broke support on the Qs, we were looking for the first move down to this point on the Qs. If we got through that, we were looking for the next line down. If we got through that, so on and so forth. It stopped abruptly below this line. So as we move down, especially on a move like that, which I was not in, we move our stops. We trail our wins so that if it does find an unplanned or unknown support level or block of buyers, you got stopped out with good profit. Okay. So that was that trade. Then we're pulling back. We're pulling back. Another lower high. Okay. So what are we waiting for? We're waiting for a break of the trend line, which would have been right here. Okay, a break of the trend line, and you want to get below a level of support. Now, there wasn't much of a support level here yet because the real support was all the way down here. So I told people during this time, I said, guys, we have a little bit of a support here on this blue line. Okay, we had it here. We already took it out, so I don't count that as really a support. Some people take the risk because, especially when ADD is trending down the way it started to, sometimes a break of the trend is good enough for them. We were still trending down on SPY, still trending down on the Qs, still trending down on ADD. So if you want to take an additional risk of playing puts, even though you didn't wait for a break of support, because there wasn't one, the real support is all the way down here. So the hope was that if we were to break the trend and start to move down, that we'd make a straight shot down here to support. That's why that circle exists there. It got there, tried to hold it. We pushed a little bit lower, got to our next futures line, and that was it. Okay. That was the third trade of the day we found. Okay, and then we recovered, start coming back up. It was at this time I was at lunch, so I missed all of this. But during this time, I kept writing in chat, even though I'm sitting here eating a little mini pan pizza for lunch. I was typing, guys, higher lows are bad for what? I'm trying to remind people, hey, shouldn't be looking for puts right now. We broke the downtrend. We've taken out the most recent resistance. This thing's got some legs on it. I believe at this time, ADD had found a bottom and started to rotate to the upside, right? We were no longer selling off as a whole in the market. There was some footing being found. We were starting to move up, and you don't want to be risky or overly aggressive when the dynamics of the market have changed, where we're no longer trending down on everything. In fact, we hit a bottom and started to move in the other direction. So I type, higher lows are bad for puts, right? Higher lows are bad for puts. You don't have to play calls if you don't like it, but remember our rules. We come off higher lows, we're expecting resistance to fail, not to hold. So if you say that, oh, look, there's a higher low, we're up against resistance. Some people see this and say, I'm buying calls now. Some people say, I'm going to wait for a close above that resistance, then I'll get in, which would have gotten you in here at 1246. Where are you hoping to go? Well, first and foremost, you got to get above this resistance. So that probably wouldn't have been the best place to try it. But if we get above that one, we'd be aiming all the way up here, which this case, it would have worked out, would have been a slow grind, but ultimately made it up to that point where we did struggle to continue higher. Popped up for a minute, started to come back down. At this point, 120. Told everybody, this may be, look at the timestamp. Somebody was just telling us that they were up 2.5% on their account today. I was congratulating them, right? Any full percentage point growth on a trading account in a day is amazing. Great work. By the way, this may be a lower high in the making. Now, what I was looking at was not just SPY, but more the Qs at this point in time, because we were struggling. What time was that? 120. We were struggling at 120 right here. So we had come down, told everybody at 120, this looks like Qs were at resistance. I said, this looks like it might be a lower high in the making. We're expecting support to fail. Now, if it does, we'd be looking for the first support here on the Qs. If we get through that, the next one would have been down here in this area, which we almost got to. But nonetheless, at this point, also ADD was in the middle of, nope, that was not the time. This was another trade we were looking at here. ADD was still trending up. So it was a little bit aggressive, but lower highs bad for calls. So whether you took puts or stayed out of calls, that's the reason I made this comment. 120. We held resistance here. We held resistance on Qs. We were able to get down. This ended up being like a 40-cent move or so. But again, from resistance down to support, that's why that circle exists, okay? Then we put in higher lows. So if you're still looking for puts, higher lows, not good for puts. We're expecting resistance to fail, not hold. Ultimately, it did fail, and we went right back up to the next resistance where we did pop through and ended up coming back down. Now, somebody was asking me, Jimmy, how do you know when to be aggressive and how do you know when to wait to buy these pullbacks and which lower highs are likely to fail and which ones are not likely to fail? That was a great question. And it forced me to think about why I see things the way I do, but I've never been asked that question. What makes it okay to be aggressive and what makes it more important to be conservative? And that answer, I think, is very helpful, so I'm going to share it with you. We are putting in lower highs, okay? Now, the reason this was brought up is because a gentleman over here was buying puts here and was asking, Jimmy, I was buying puts here because it was a lower high. I should be expecting support to break. And it didn't work, right? And I said, well, the thing I teach you guys all the time is the same reasoning as over here, right? We had an uptrend. Two criteria is, right, wait for the break of the trend, okay, and make sure you take out a line of support. Well, we broke the trend, and like earlier, we didn't have really any support on the way up except for all the way down here. But we broke the trend, we created a support, we put in a lower high, So then that support becomes this. If you played the break of this, you literally bought the bottom of the move. You have to be prepared to get out of this trade if it doesn't break this area sooner than later, right? But very least is if we get back above that line, you got to get out with a stop. Okay, this gentleman kept it very small because he was testing something. But the point was, and this is the thing, if you're going to choose to take these counter trend trades, meaning if there is no support or to break, and this is rare that there's not, and you want to think, hey, should I just play the break of the trend line? Let me then point to you to ADD. Okay, so at this point, we were still, even though we were putting in a lower high on SPY, this is our Qs, SPY right here, ADD was still trending up. So all this morning, when we were looking for puts, I would have felt a lot more comfortable being aggressive in my put entries to the downside because of ADD. Well, ADD at 12:15 found a bottom and started to move to the upside. So while we are moving down ADD, Qs, and SPY, I think being aggressive on your entries is more acceptable. If the dynamics of the market, so what has changed since puts going down and puts going after 12 o'clock? Well, number one, volume is almost always lower. Number two, volatility is usually lower. And number three, theta is definitely higher. Number four, the market started to buy, bottomed out and started to buy back up. So a lot has changed on the put scenario side at this time than we had in the morning. So that's why I said to him, I said, listen, if you want to take puts, make sure you check all of the things that we normally look for. Is ADD still trending down? Is the market momentum still in your favor? If it's not, I would highly recommend that you wait for your entries and look for the conservative entry. That's the only thing I could say. If this trade were to happen while ADD was still moving down, I would 100% be on board with aggressively getting into puts, assuming the support was going to fail. Okay, but that was not the case anymore. We had a nice green move up on ADD. Look at this. Okay, sorry it's so small. I try and squeeze it in. We hit a bottom and then a lot of buying came in. You saw it there on SPY. You saw it here on the Qs. All of these things, it was here on the Qs, point to buying, right? So when we see buying, we've got to be aware and be less aggressive on shorting, right? You want to play with the market, not against it. So I hope that was helpful. Likewise, the difference between this put off of lower highs was that ADD had started to dump. So I was explaining to him, hey, I would buy puts on this lower high this time versus this one over here that he was doing because ADD at the time, this is 156, had already started to dump off. So the move to the upside at ADD got weak enough to start falling. So momentum of the rest of the market, not just SPY and Qs, was in our favor. And as you can see, that trade produced a quick move down to, well, it got through the first support, which was right there, made it down to our futures line, ended up hitting a support line on the Qs as well. Where was that? This was the lower high in the Qs, and it made it down to this support right here. Okay, and a little bit lower, almost to the orange line, but nonetheless, quick trade late in the day. There's signs that would help the trade feel more comfortable than others. That's all I'm trying to make. All right. After this, I got nothing else. There was no other trade suggestions that I made, and that's simply because, well, I don't trade this late in the day. So these trade situations here were rarities for me. I don't trade them, and I make people aware of that, guys. I'm not taking these trades. I don't trade after 12 o'clock, but it's looking like these might work out if you're interested. Now, I do have people that like to trade all day long. I'm not one of those people, but I can still read a chart, okay? Do they all work out? No, not always. But if you get pullbacks against you this late in the day, they hurt. They hurt. But with that, the market's going to be closing here in, 13 minutes. So we're going to wrap this video up. I hope you found some useful information in this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. Well, while we're here, I'll show you. when do we go from calls to puts, right? So we could see that we were trending up here at this point. And for me, my rule would normally be, we break the trend line, you have support here, you'd wait for a close below that support, and then we'd be targeting the next support down. So that would have been a trade that we would have been looking for. And I would tell everybody, if we close below this line, okay, so when we get there, if you want to stay in, you put a stop loss in profit. If we close below this line here, I'd be looking for the move to continue all the way down to 578.28. Now that's a big move this late in the day. Would take some serious momentum. You would want to check ADD. ADD is on an uptrend. Qs right here down on a similar support. So you'd need the Qs to break support. If the Qs break support, they're likely to come down to this support right here, which is at 491.87. In which case, if the Qs made it down to their support before SPY made it down to theirs, it would probably stop SPY in its track. But normally, this late in the day, we break the trend, we get below support, we're looking for the next support down, which would have been here. We got through that. Next support down would be here. We did not get through that. We stopped right on it. These pullbacks this late in the day hurt dramatically. So if you're going to take a late day trade on a 0 DTE, get in, get out, take the profit that you made, and live to trade another day. All right. So with that said, we're going to wrap it up. Hope you found some useful information in this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to join our Discord community, we'd love to have you. There's a link down below. And we do this all day, every day for now. And that's pretty much it. I hope you all had a fantastic day today. Until tomorrow, I love you guys. See ya. That was fucked up. I love you guys. See ya.